kind of weird when they got rid of the flagship store in Manhattan. Then the rumors started, and the conference calls were more frequent, and you were hearing rumors about them closing stores, not liquidating the entire company. And we were like, oh, that's not good. And we were a low-volume Babies R Us store. So there was a big conference call, and my store manager left, and I was a closing manager that night. And she says, I have to go home and take this call. I go, is everything all right? She says, I don't think so. And I was like, well, call me. And so I was working that night, and she called. So I ran into the office to take the call. And she was crying, and she made me cry. And she's like, Amber, she said, it's true. I said, what? She says, they're closing 180 stores, and one of them is ours.
Thank you for calling Toys R Us. We would like to thank you for shopping with us for over 70 years, and we appreciate your kind expressions as we close our doors. As of March 23rd, Toys R Us will start liquidation.
I think I'm more bitter because I feel like this was an elaborate plan. So anyone that's worked in retail knows, after Christmas, stores are quiet, usually preparing for inventory. We were getting these massive trucks of merchandise in January. I'm like, what's going on? So that was a red flag that none of us even picked up on. But that these trucks were enormous, and Graco, we had so much Graco stuff. We just like Crayola. It was like, where is all this stuff coming from? It was another bad sign. And we were like, this isn't good. Again, when you have all those red flags, you say this isn't good, it's not good. And so when they announced them closing the store, we're like, oh my gosh, and here we are, a store packed with merchandise at the end of January. So when I say this was such an elaborate plan, they were over ordering, and there was something we had read about somebody, someone lost a job that worked for Graco because they were filling all these orders knowing this company was in bankruptcy already. So they didn't have to pay for any of this merchandise. They were covered by bankruptcy law. So they packed all these stores with merchandise. There were viable offers to buy this company, and they wouldn't take any of the offers, and some were $100 million. They wouldn't sell the company. It was much more lucrative for them, more lucrative to liquidate the stores, because now they're packed with merchandise, and you don't have to pay these vendors back almost $1 billion.
There's nothing wrong with profit, by the way. That profit went to pension funds, to charities. It went to a wide array of institutions. A lot of people benefited from that. And by the way, as enterprises become more profitable, they can hire more people.
The larger question is, what kind of returns are they generating for their investors? And would their investors really be better off just putting money in an index fund? And my conclusion was, at least since 2004, they probably would have been better off in an index fund. They have the spectacular returns that bring the money in, but they also have very risky deals. They add more leverage to the companies they buy, so that makes them more risky than they were if they were sitting in the S&P. And they also have an unlimited call on their investors' money, and that's very valuable. I mean, if I have an agreement with you where you get to pull money from me at any time you want, I should get a lot of compensation for that.
Bain, KKR, and Venado, Toys R Us was struggling, and they bought it for $6 billion. On paper, they only put $1 billion down, and they saddled Toys R Us paying back the other $5 billion. So they were paying almost rent to themselves. So I said, I don't understand how you buy a company, right? But then you make them pay the loan off, which was like, because Toys R Us was still making money. If they were making $11 billion a year, how are you going bankrupt with that? But what they were doing was that they were making them pay the loan back, so they were never getting out from under that debt and could not take that money and reinvest it in the stores. or invest in their online shopping, where they should, which is where we're headed, and so the stores were falling apart. They were, they just weren't reinvesting anything. They were eliminating more full-time positions. They were just cutting. Even our budgets for, our supply budget was cut. They cut out our floor care. I mean, it's so little. You saw these changes all happening. It was just hard to wrap your mind around how that all worked. And again, I'm still baffled. So the way that they did that used to be illegal. And so I had asked somebody, there's a gentleman that's involved with us that we meet in Washington all the time, and I asked him, and he said that this practice of buying a company and not putting any money up and just financing all of that loan used to be illegal. And somewhere, I said, well, when did that become legal to do that? My store manager, his name is Jim, and he said one day, well, thanks to Bain Capital, we can do this. Moving forward, all of our stores are going to be these big, super side-by-sides. But me, I'm like a little bit of a news junkie. When Mitt Romney was running for president, I wanted to know about him. I voted on both sides, and I read about his company. So when he said Bain Capital, my ears popped up. I was like, what? What are you talking about? And that's when he said, thanks to Bain Capital, they're the ones putting the money up for this, so that we can expand all of our stores and become bigger and blah, blah, blah. And so I go, do you know what Bain Capital does to companies? And now he messaged me. When we chatted a little bit about it, I said, I told you 12 years ago. I told you then, maybe this is 2006, 2007. I said, I told you then. I said, when you bragged about Bain Capital, and look where we are right now. I told you what Bain Capital did to companies, right? And he said, I got to give that one to you.
You guys ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Don't look at me with those sweetie eyes.
long-time employees, many with more than 2 decades with Toys R Us, say they're extremely disappointed with the way the company treated them after filing for bankruptcy in September.
25 years. No severance. That's heartbreaking.
It's just sad that it had to come to this, because it didn't. And it just shows you how they don't care about their employees, that they can fill their pockets with millions of dollars, and we leave here today, our last day, as a family with no money in our pocket.
To get your bonus before you file bankruptcy because you know that's what you're going to do, that is extremely heartless.
Another sobering statistic is really the fees that Toys R Us is paying to some outside firms, law firms getting paid $14.2 million. Those employees, well, they're getting paid about $1,200 an hour. Then there's another firm, $200 to $975 an hour. And then finally, the auditing firm, anywhere from $45 to $800 an hour is what they're charging for their services. Again, these employees are saddened that this is their final day, but they say that they are going to not go down without a fight.
The very last day, it was myself and the liquidator. So it was just us. And I sat there, and then I called a gentleman that was one of my peers, and we were supposed to stay till 6 o'clock at night. And I texted him, and he was on a job interview. And so we were letting people go on job interviews, and because everyone had fun jobs. And so I called him and I texted him. I'm like, Rick, I said, can you please come here? He's like, I can't be here. And so he got there around 5 o'clock. And so I took a good look around the store. I hugged the liquidator. He said, listen, he goes, I wish you guys all the best. And, and I looked at Rick and I said, thank you. And I walked out and I stood there and I looked at this empty store. And I turned around and looked, and I had my keys. And we're supposed to drop them in the box. And I was like, oh, wait. I said, yeah, take these. And I got in my car and I just sat in front of the store and I cried. I cried the whole way home. I think that's when that was probably what really, really hit me. Shit just got real, But that was the worst. And I said to myself, it figures. I had the most tenure in the building. I just figures I would be the last one to leave this building with the liquidator. It was just par for the course. I knew it would be me that would get stuck doing that.
The best advice I ever got to be a leader in business was from my father. And my dad had a high school education. He was a journeyman electrician. He never ran an organization. He never had the opportunity to go to college. I got my first promotion when I got out of school. I worked for Procter & Gamble, and I got my first promotion where I was going to finally be the boss. And I called my dad all excited to tell him about how, his son was getting promoted into this position. And I said, Dad, do you have any advice for me? Because I'm about to inherit a team that I'm going to be responsible for. And he said, well, Dave, the only advice I can give you is you should find out how people want to be treated and treat them that way.
We are here at Dave Brandon's house. At Dave Brandon's house. He bought this penthouse after the company went into bankruptcy. He bought this penthouse after the company went into bankruptcy. We've got families from across the country who have questions that we need answered. We need severance pay. And we need justice. And we need justice.
Dave Brandon, these huge, big conference calls and webinars and stuff. He got on with us and told us no need to worry. We are just restructuring a loan. Everyone's job is safe. No need to worry. Toys R Us is still strong. Blah blah blah. So with that being said, I was very loyal to the company. I was there 29 years, and so we believed him. We believed him when he said, no need for us to jump ship. We're just really restructuring a loan. And then in December, they had a big manager meeting. and they all said, no, we're going to be innovative. We're going to change the formats and be interactive with the stores, and so that's the future. And so we're like, okay. I've been with the company long enough to know I want to say about 10, 15 years ago, they had closed maybe about 100 stores. And Long Island was hit hard at that time. I think we lost about 4 stores just on Long Island. So I remembered they closed one right across the street from our store and Freeport. It was like Levittown. There's a few stores they closed. But we were still a strong company. So when they said about the bankruptcy and that we're just restructuring, none of us really were worried at first. We work with the Center for Popular Democracy. Her name is Carrie Gleason. She's been instrumental in kind of educating us on all this, and then we would come home and we would Google search it, and we would find all those answers. You can really do the research, but the average person doesn't know that. Wall Street is literally killing retail. They're buying up all these companies that are struggling, buying their debt enough to just liquidate them, and they make enough money, obviously. And then when they're in bankruptcy, you don't have to pay that money back. And then with Sears and Kmart. Eddie Lampert is the CEO, and he's the hedge fund company. So that's like double dipping. So when we got involved with this fight, we knew we weren't going to get severance. When they reached out to us, we're like, what do you want to see come out of this? I said, what I would like to see come out of this is the laws to be changed. And that's slowly happening. Like last week, New Jersey, they live streamed it for us on Facebook. New Jersey introduced legislation that any company with more than 100 employees, I forget what the logistics were of it, they have to pay them severance. It is part of the package. They cannot have any mass layoffs like they did with Toys R Us and not pay them severance. So that's where we wanted to be.
Mary Alice, New Jersey is now the first state in the nation to guarantee workers severance pay in the event of mass layoffs. The so-called Toys R Us bill was signed by Governor Murphy this week. The legislation was the result of the bankruptcy of New Jersey-based Toys R Us. Now, companies will have to pay employees a week's pay for each year of service if there is a mass layoff or a plant closing. The law also mandates companies will have to increase the number of days notices given before layoffs occur. The law affects companies with 100 or more full-time workers.
That day, I will never forget finding out in March that we were getting zero. So that was my first big meltdown, and a lot of others. I mean, when I got involved with this project, when they reached out to us, 5 or 6 of us went to Washington, D.C. So these people we never met before reach out to us through Facebook, and she's like, well, would you do an interview with BuzzFeed? So that was my first interview. I was like, do an interview? Like what? They just want to ask you some questions. I was like, oh, okay. So I did an interview with BuzzFeed. And I'm talking to people, I've never met them now. So they said, would you like to come to Washington? And we're going to meet with Bernie Sanders. And I'm like, what? So I tell my husband, he's like, how do you feel about that? I said, I don't know. I said, well, I've been talking to them, and I kind of looked to see who they were, and it was the Center for Popular Democracy, and I was like, I don't know. So I called my friend Mary Jane, who lives in Texas, and I used to work with her in New York, and now she worked for Toys R Us in Texas, so her store was still open. When they said the first 180 stores, they called it a wave. So wave 1 was my group of stores, and when they announced the liquidation, then they called that wave 2. So I was part of wave 1, so I was in constant contact with her because their stores were still open. And I said, Mary Jane, I said, well, you want to come to Washington? I want you to talk to these people. And she's like, are you serious? We're going to get on a plane and go meet some strangers? I was like, I know. I said, but I'm going to follow my gut. I said, I consider myself a pretty good judge of character. I said, I don't know. I said, I'm on the fence, but I said, I kind of want to go.
So as a result of that takeover, wages and benefits suffered.
Correct. The liquidation started in February, and we kept saying, well, what's the severance? What's the severance? Every week, they were working it out with the bankruptcy judge. And then we were more than halfway into the liquidation, and that's when they let us know that we were getting nothing.
So 30 years, and then you let go without a penny.
It was the best decision I ever made, was to get on that plane and trust my instinct. And we did a video with Bernie, and that was amazing. But he was also one of the first senators to sign on to where putting some pressure on them to pay us severance. And so that this all started with severance. With or without any money, though, we had all said that we were in this to really, if we can get the laws changed. And as this is happening, like, it was such a proud moment. Like, I took my lunch break so I could watch the live stream of them in New Jersey introducing that legislation.
Just when you thought you'd seen the last of Toys R Us, the company's top lenders canceled a planned bankruptcy auction at the last minute where it would have sold off intellectual properties like brand names and the Jeffrey the Giraffe mascot. Instead, the company has proposed a reorganizational plan that might open the door to new merchandising and even retail opportunities in the future. So maybe Toys R Us doesn't go away. It's not going to save anything in time for these stores that have closed, the people who have lost their jobs this holiday season, forget about it. But down the road, the brand could still exist.
It's still going on. About 2 months ago, we found out that they canceled the bankruptcy. So what does that mean? Like, how do you just cancel your bankruptcy? Enough to keep the intellectual properties and also enough to keep Jeffrey the Giraffe as their mascot. So that's how they're able to rebrand and use Jeffrey and bring back Toys R Us. That's the whole, because it's Jeffrey the Giraffe. So they were able to, because the vendors, this is still wrapped up in the bankruptcy court, of which we're waiting to file. I think it's supposed to be this week, that they owed them, I want to say about $800 million, so almost $1 billion. You're talking Hasbro, Mattel, Crayola, Graco, all those manufacturers are owed money. And now being protected under the bankruptcy laws, they don't have to pay them the $800 million, and they're probably going to get about 23 cents on the dollar. But they get to keep Jeffrey the Giraffe, and they get to keep the buildings that they owned. That's why they're changing it to True Kids, TRU Kids. So they don't use the same Toys R Us kid, but they're bringing back Jeffrey the Giraffe. What they did was, so we found out the stores were still open, and in the GRC, which is the Global Resource Center, they had a prototype in May of Jeffrey's toy box. It was a big banner, and we saw it. I may have the picture saved somewhere. And I'm looking at it, so that was May 23rd, I think. The stores were still open to June 30th. So how did you already have a prototype of the next company you're opening with Jeffrey the Giraffe? So when we say it's an elaborate plan, I really think it was really a well-calculated, elaborate plan to liquidate these stores, get rid of all that debt, and then reopen the store yourself.